At dawn, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath as two empires faced each other across a blood-soaked field, and Napoleon Bonaparte, master of Europe, prepared to win the battle that would destroy him. He had come farther than any army before him, driven by destiny, ambition, and the belief that one final victory would bend history to his will. Yet on this day, success would prove more dangerous than defeat. Napoleon's rise had been meteoric. A young Corsican officer who rode the chaos of revolution to the throne of France, reshaping warfare with speed, discipline, and an iron will. And by 1812, his empire stretched from Spain to the edges of Poland. But one rival remained unconquered: Russia, vast, distant, and unwilling to submit. Tsar Alexander refused Napoleon's system of alliances and blockades, and so the emperor gathered the largest army Europe had ever seen, more than 500,000 men from dozens of nations, and marched east, confident that one decisive battle would end the war, as all his others had. The march itself was already a warning: roads dissolving into mud, supply lines stretching thin, soldiers dying not from combat, but from hunger and exhaustion. Yet Napoleon pressed on, believing that victory lay just ahead, always just one more march away. The Russians retreated again and again, burning villages, emptying granaries, refusing to give him the battle he wanted, and this strategy gnawed at Napoleon's patience, because his genius depended on decisive encounters, on crushing the enemy's army in one blow. Finally, near the village of Borodino, west of Moscow, the Russians turned to fight, digging into the earth, building redoubts, preparing to defend their homeland at any cost. And Napoleon saw what he had been waiting for: the chance to win everything. On September 7, 1812, the battle began. Cannon fire shaking the ground, smoke swallowing the sun, tens of thousands of men colliding in waves of violence that lasted hour after hour, and Napoleon directed the battle with cold precision, ordering attacks, shifting forces, watching through the haze as his army slowly pushed forward. The fighting was brutal and relentless. Villages changed hands multiple times. Artillery tore gaps through ranks of men, and by midday the field was carpeted with the dead and wounded, yet still the Russians fought on. Napoleon had one final weapon in reserve: his Imperial Guard, the elite force that had never failed him, and many urged him to unleash them to break the Russian line completely, but he hesitated, fearing a counterattack, guarding his last strength. By evening, the Russian army began to withdraw, battered, bloodied, but not destroyed, and Napoleon stood as the victor, holding the field, his enemy retreating, the road to Moscow open. By every traditional measure, Borodino was a French victory. The Russians had lost more men, they had abandoned their positions, and Napoleon could claim triumph. Yet as night fell, there was no celebration, only silence broken by the cries of the wounded. His army was shattered, tens of thousands were dead or injured, and the decisive blow he needed had not been delivered. The Russian army still existed, still defiant, still capable of resistance. Napoleon marched on to Moscow, expecting the city to surrender, to offer terms, to end the war. But instead he found a ghost city, largely abandoned, and soon engulfed in flames. Whether set deliberately or born of chaos, the fires consumed his prize, leaving him with ashes instead of victory. Weeks passed, and no peace came. The Tsar refused to negotiate, winter crept closer, supplies vanished, and the very land seemed to turn against the invaders. And only then did the truth become clear. Borodino had not been the end. It had been the point of no return. When Napoleon finally ordered the retreat, it was too late. Snow fell, temperatures plunged, and the long road back became a corridor of death. Soldiers freezing, starving, hunted by Russian forces, the Grand Army dissolving into fragments, and of the hundreds of thousands who had marched into Russia, only a fraction returned. In Paris, the myth of invincibility cracked. Allies began to doubt, enemies grew bold, and Napoleon's empire, built on momentum and fear, started to unravel. Historians would later debate Borodino endlessly, some calling it a tactical victory, others a strategic disaster, but all agree on its meaning. Napoleon won the battle, but lost the war, and more than that, he lost the illusion that victory alone could secure his destiny. The paradox of Borodino lies in its lesson that power can overreach, that success can blind even the greatest minds, and that history is not decided by a single moment of triumph, but by what follows after the smoke clears. For Napoleon, Borodino marked the turning of the tide, the moment when conquest gave way to survival, when the emperor who had reshaped Europe began his descent toward exile and legend. Today the battlefield is quiet, the echoes of cannon long gone, but its story remains, a reminder that winning is not always enough, and that sometimes the day you win is the day you lose everything. If you want more stories where history feels alive, consider subscribing and join us again as we explore the moments that shaped our world.